Warm welcome, everybody. And it's very nice to see you people here as present, but also I want to send warm greetings outside there online. First few things, if you need translation, we have Sarah helping us there. So maybe Sarah can go, or you can go quite near to Sarah that you can have the translation.
I think we must get a new translation from English to Finnish. So maybe we should also say.
Yeah.
English as well.
So if you think that you need translation from English to Finnish, then go near Sarah, and Sarah will help you with translation. Sitten meillä on olemassa täällä vahva maskisuositus, eli toivoinen olisi, että henkilöt, jotka on salissa, niin voisivat käyttää maskia ja huolehditaan käsidensistä ja hygieniasta ja mahdollisuuksien mukaan etäisyyksistä. But I think now is the next person who will say the beginning words. So our Bishop, Teemu, welcome.
Rakkaat Suomen Caritas ry:n jäsenet ja ystävät, jotka olette kokoontuneet tähän saliin juhlaseminaariin Caritaksen 60-vuotisen taipaleen kunniaksi. Tervehdin lämpimästi myös teitä kaikkia, jotka internetin välityksellä Suomessa ja sen ulkopuolella seuraatte seminaaria. Caritaksen perustoiminta, kärsivien ja puutteenalaisten avustaminen, juontaa juurensa jo varhaisen kirkon historiasta. Ensimmäisten diakonien valinta auttamaan köyhiä on tästä puhutteleva todistus. Mutta itse Jeesuskin asettaa tämän toiminnan, kaikkien uskovien toiminnan keskukseen ensinnä oman esimerkkinsä kautta, mutta myös Matteuksen evankeliumin 25. luvussa kerrotaan Jeesuksen kuvaus viimeisestä tuomiosta. Siinä maailman lopussa tuomari ja kuningas Kristus sanoo oikealla puolellaan oleville: minun oli nälkä ja te annoitte minulle ruokaa, minun oli jano ja te annoitte minulle juotavaa, minä olin koditon ja te otitte minut luoksenne, minä olin alasti ja te vaatetitte minut, minä olin sairas ja te kävitte minua katsomassa, minä olin vankilassa ja te tulitte minun luokseni. Ja sitten hän samaistuu kaikkiin näihin köyhiin ja puutteenalaisiin ja sanoo, että minkä te olette tehneet näille vähimmistä velistäni, sen te olette tehneet minulle. Ja hän lupaa taivaan autuuden niille, jotka ovat auttaneet köyhiä. Mutta ja niille, jotka eivät ole välittäneet ihmisten kärsimyksistä, joutuvat ikuiseen kadotukseen. Ensimmäinen katolinen piispa Suomessa reformaation jälkeen, Monsignor Mikael Pyks, aloitti Caritaksen toiminnan perustamalla 1927 Katariina-yhdistyksen, jonka tarkoituksena oli avata muun muassa lastenkoti. Vaikka suunnitelma epäonnistui, lastenkoti kuitenkin perustettiin sääntökuntasisarten toimesta. Hyvän tekeväisyyttä harrastanut yhdistys muutti 60 vuotta sitten tasan tänä päivänä 22.10.1960 Caritas-yhdistykseksi. Sille Caritas lahjoitti Helsingissä ja sen ympäristössä asuntoja, jotka Caritaksen aikoinaan keskeinen toimija Lorenz Lindemann vuokrasi edullisesti varattomille ja sairaille katolilaisille. Vuonna 1982 Caritas-yhdistys päätti muuttaa nimensä ja sääntönsä sekä lahjoittaa omaisuutensa lähinnä asuntoja hiippakunnalle. Uudeksi nimeksi tuli Caritas Finlandie, Suomen Caritas ry. Samalla anottiin Caritas Internationaalisen jäsenyyttä. Vain muutama vuosi sitten Caritaksen pääsihteerin virka tuli palkalliseksi, mistä olemme tietysti olleet kovin iloisia, että nyt meillä on päätoiminen tai ainakin palkallinen pääsihteeri, joka toimii, joka saa palkkaa ja toimii hyvin. Näin hallitus ei ole niinkään toimija, vaan toiminnan seuraaja, ehkä myös tarkastaja ja kehittäjä. Resurssipulasta johtuen olemme kiitollisia tuesta, jonka saamme Sveitsin ja Tanskan Caritakselta. Luettelonomaisesti Suomen Caritaksen toiminta hiippakunnan alueella on hoitaa adventti- ja paastokeräyksiä, avustaa köyhiä perheitä, lapsia, maahanmuuttajia. Erityisesti tuen saajina ovat köyhien perheiden lapset, joita tuetaan leirimaksuissa, joita hiippakunta järjestää. Tietenkin Caritaksen tehtävänä on järjestää hyväntekeväisyys, myyjäisiä ja kehottaa antamaan myös Caritakselle varoja työtä varten. Yhteistyö seurakuntien kanssa on hyvin tärkeää. Suomen ulkopuolella Caritas on mukana monasti suurissa avustusprojekteissa kehitysmaissa, Aasiassa, Afrikassa ja Latinalaisessa Amerikassa. Viime vuosikymmenien aikana toiminta on laajentunut muun muassa globaaliin kasvatuksen ja globaaliin viestinnän sekä vaikuttamistyön saralla. Toiminnan ytimessä on edelleen sosiaalinen oikeudenmukaisuus, rauha ja tasa-arvon edistäminen evankeliumin hengessä. Meillä on tarve tehdä itseämme ja työtämme tunnetuksi varsinkin oman kirkkomme piirissä. Sitä ei koskaan voi aliarvioida tämän työn merkitystä. Ja saada myös lisää tukijoita seurakuntalaisten piirissä. Haluaisin erityisesti nostaa erään henkilön esiltä, joka vähän aikaa sitten tuli tähän saliin, Maila Bertolt, joka istuu siellä aivan takana, mutta joka on ollut myöskin aivan tärkeässä asemassa Caritaksen työssä. Hän on toiminut muun muassa puheenjohtajana. En tiedä kuinka monta vuotta, mutta kuitenkin hän on kuitenkin 6 vuotta. Hyvä. Kiitos, että olet saapunut tänne. Kiitos teille kaikille.
Nyt seuraavana minulla on ilo ja kunnia puhua tai lukea teille tervehdys meidän Suomen komissaarilta Jutta Urpilaiselta, joka tekee läheisesti yhteistyötä myös Caritas Euroopan kanssa siellä Brysselissä. Now I am honored to read the speech from Commissar Jutta Urpilainen, who is doing a lot of work in Brussels, based in Caritas Europe office. I will read the speech in Finnish, but it has also sent out in English to you. Arvoisa juhlaväki, naiset ja herrat, hyvät ystävät. Pandemia rajoittaessa mahdollisuuksiamme fyysisiin kohtaamisiin olen erittäin iloinen voidessani tervehtiä juhlaseminaarianne näin kirjallisesti. Suomen Caritaksen 60-vuotisjuhla kertoo pitkäjänteisestä työstä, jota ilman yhteinen hyvinvointimme ei olisi niin vahvaa kuin mihin olemme tottuneet ja voineet nojata. Yhteisestä hyvästämme onkin kiittäminen merkittävin osin elävää kansalaisyhteiskuntaa ja vapaaehtoisia ponnisteluita. Juhlaseminaarinne otsikko Kohti yhdenvertaista yhteiskuntaa kiteyttää varsin onnistuneesti oleellisen. Yhdenvertainen yhteiskunta, jossa jokainen voi löytää oman paikkansa ja kokea olevansa arvokas, on inhimillinen hyvinvoinnin perusta. Se on edelleen myös Suomessa tärkeä tavoite, jota kohti meidän on sinnikkäästi yhdessä edettävä. Yhdenvertaisuus on tavoite mitä suurimmassa määrin myös Euroopan unionin kumppanimaissa, joiden kanssa saan kansainvälisistä kumppanuuksista vastaavana komissaarina tehdä töitä. Tämän koronapandemia on meille kipeästi osoittanut. Se on koskenut kipeimmin valmiiksi heikommassa asemassa olevia kaikkialla maailmassa. Näyttää siltä, että yhdenvertaisuus ja tasa-arvo ovat tekijöitä, jotka tekevät yhteiskunnasta vahvemman koronaviruksen kaltaisen uhan edessä. Viruksen torjunnassa auttavat niin vahvat julkiset palvelut kuin myös luja luottamus viranomaisiin ja instituutioihin. Tämä koronaviruspandemia ei jää viimeiseksi kriisiksi. Siksi tässä onkin hyvää oppia meille myös tulevaisuutta vahvistavia ratkaisuja ajatellen. Caritas auttaa Suomessa ja maailmalla. Haluan kiittää järjestöä ja ennen muuta teitä, hyvät tekijät, siitä huikeasta panoksesta, jotka olette oikeudenmukaisuuden, rauhan ja tasa-arvon edistämisellä antaneet. Olen varma, että teidän työnne tulee olemaan arvokasta Suomelle ja suomalaisille myös tulevat 60 vuotta. Lämpimästi teitä onnitellen, Jutta Urpilainen. And now I have pleasure to say greetings to Peter, who will give our next speech about the same theme. And I think this was a good introduction about this thematic what we are talking today. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much. Ja hyvää huomenta kaikille minunkin puolesta. Seminaarin järjestäjät ovat pyytäneet esittämään puhettani englanniksi ja sen takia taas käännän sitten toiselle kielelle. So good morning to everyone. I'm Peter Kariuki from the Ministry of Justice. Can everybody hear me? Now you can hear. Yeah, the microphone is okay. Sorry about that. My name is Peter Kariuki and I come from the Ministry of Justice, Department of Democracy and Fundamental Rights. And there I am working as the Secretary General for the Advisory Board for Ethnic Relations, ETNO, that I will be talking about shortly. My speech will not last as long as the time has been reserved for me. I'll try and be brief. My speech will also not be as spiritually fulfilling as the bishop's speech was. Thank you so much for that. And I'll try and continue from where the commissar stopped without relying on Stockholm on improving inclusivity in society. The topic of my speech is promoting good relations in an inclusive society. Before I get to my presentation or speech, as you may call it, let me congratulate Caritas on these tremendous occasions. 60 years of important work in advancing equality and in supporting the less advantaged is an important milestone. So, congratulations on my part on behalf of the advisory board. Of course, it's an honor to be invited here today. This is probably the first or second seminar where I have been speaking live. Everything since March has been online, and it's good to see people. It's good to see Catholics as well, like myself, live and not online. So it's actually a pleasure to be here today. Special thanks to Laura and to Adriana. I know we've been trying to get them here for a while. It's good that they sent me. Before I get to the concept of good relations, maybe you should go to the next slide. That's slide number 2. You should go back, please. Yes, that's the slide there. So before I get to the idea of how I think we should advance good relations in an inclusive society, let me give you an example of a structure or a platform that has been formally established to do this very purpose. ETNO is a formal platform that has been established by the government, and it is established by government decree. And the government decree states that, or tries to build a formal setting where different actors in society can sit together and discuss common issues as equal discussive partners and come up with common solutions and ideas on how to tackle them. The main idea is very simple. Create a platform where you can encourage cooperation and dialogue between different actors in society. Just give me a second, I'll realize that I need to ease my work and open this presentation myself. So, this means that the government in its decree has established what in Finnish you call a neuvottelukunta or an advisory board, and these advisory boards are very many. But what makes ETNO somehow unique is that it brings together not only migrant and migrant-based or migrants-established NGOs, it brings ministries, political parties, labor unions, it brings also regional representatives on the same table to discuss matters related either to integration, migration, security, or any other matter that might be deemed relevant by its members. So, which means that in the National Advisory Board, where I act as Secretary General, we have probably 80 members, where we have main members and their deputies. And then we have 7 regional boards around the country that are established in regional centers for the economy, transport, and the environment. And in those boards, there is normally between 20 and 25 members, which means that all in all, we have almost 300 individuals around the country that have come to form up this national platform, as you may call it. As I said, the idea of the board, and here in Southern Finland, we have what you call Southern Region Advisory Board for Ethnic Relations, is to bring local actors, main of which are the NGOs, CSOs, to act as partners in discussing issues and in furthering or implementing issues that are important to that particular region. On the national level, that is the case as well, but on a national level. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the functions of this board? The advisory board has got a number of functions that are stated in the government's decree. And there are basically 5 main functions. As I said, probably the most important one is enhancing dialogue and cooperation between these key stakeholders. And we hope that this advancement of dialogue and cooperation stays even after the advisory board's 4-year tenure is over, and the different partnerships and cooperations that have been established during the tenure will carry on through into the future. The advisory board also assesses and reports on the state of good relations in society. So we are part and parcel of different research and different preparatory processes where we look at different aspects of good relations. I will get back to the concept of good relations at the very end, to the second half of this speech. Thirdly, we issue expert advice, and this is also an important function of the board. So by bringing all these experts together, we are able to utilize their expertise on different policy formulation processes, legislation formulation processes, by arranging workshops, hearing sessions, by issuing statements, and by simply collecting views and opinions from different population or expert groups. The advisory board, as I said, participates in these different research and development projects. We work a lot with NGOs on their own projects. We work with ministries on their different projects as well, by providing either expertise or acting as partners who bring different kinds of actors into the projects. And then finally, we disseminate information. So having established such a large national network, we act as an information dissemination center, which is not the most fun work because the amount of information is quite much, but it's something that we do as part of the advisory board. Let's go to the next one. So before I go to probably the main part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about what I think are the main purposes of the advisory board. What I mentioned earlier were like the formally established functions and purposes of the board as stipulated in the government decree. But when talking about the purposes of such a board from a more wider perspective, the board's main function is to promote good relations in society. What is this good relations? I'll get back to that soon. But what we're trying to do is to somehow change or transform society into a way where it feels more inclusive, where people have more of a sense of belonging, where people feel that they are part of the community, where people feel as though they have the opportunity to participate and influence on issues that are important to their lives. The main aim is to create a cohesive society that actually fosters the possibilities for good integration. What do we mean by a cohesive society? In my opinion, when we're talking about a cohesive society, and you can see this in most of the work that's been done at government level, regional level, or even what I saw when I was doing some research background, the work done by Caritas, is I think we are trying to create a society where people have a sense of belonging. I think the main goal of integration, in addition to learning the language and going to work, is to have a sense of belonging, giving people a sense that they belong in a particular society, be it in the national or regional or local context. Second of all, we are trying to create a sense of trust. When we're thinking of people who are moving to the country, trust is a very important aspect when it comes to successful integration. By this, I mean that people feel as though they can trust the services they are being offered, they can trust the treatment that they're receiving in different service sectors. They feel as though they are trusted themselves as members of society, and so on. Another aspect can be, for example, communitarianism, where we feel as though we are part and parcel of a community and we have a responsibility to participate in the building of that society. These so-called core concepts are quite many that are behind this idea of a cohesive society. All of us, in one way or the other, try to influence them in one way or the other, and they do form part of what we do in our day-to-day work. So, for example, if you think about enhancing participation of people with a migrant background, we would ask a question on inclusion, for example, into the labor market, or in the education sector, or in vocational activities. How can we do that? What makes people drift into different labor market sectors? Why do we have certain population groups with higher unemployment rates than the other? Why do certain population groups drift to particular labor markets? So on and so forth. Why do we have certain population groups falling out of education, formal education, especially at the transition periods? So questions like that are things that we try to look at using this key concepts of that background of this thinking. When it comes to my ministry, and which is responsible for democracy, when we look at political participation and voting, this is a very important aspect when we ask ourselves, why is it that despite quite broadly extended political rights for people with migrant backgrounds in Finland, why do people vote so inactively? Under 20% of the people with voting rights in municipal elections vote. These are people with migrant backgrounds. And then when we're talking about capacity building of NGOs like Caritas, how can we be able to support our NGOs in a way that they can become active members or active players or partners in the building of a more cohesive society? So these are some of the background questions that we ask ourselves, and this is just on the part of participation. Let's go to the next slide. Maybe this is where I get to the main topic. So what is good relations? Let me confess from the very beginning, good relations as a concept was developed in the United Kingdom as part of the equality measurement framework at the beginning of this century. And around 2010, we started looking at that UK model quite closely, me and my colleagues in the Ministry of the Interior at the time. And we decided to adapt that model and test it in the Finnish context. It proved to be quite successful, and we've been working on this good relations model for the last 8 years. And as a culmination of that, the current government has taken the step to draft its first good relations implementation or action program, which is currently under the works and will be ready in the beginning of next year. So a small success. But good relations in itself is a concept. It's a way of looking at things. And I thought that maybe this, on the 60th occasion, would be something that I would share with you. Maybe you might want to use this in the future. It's something that you might want to look at closely. It's something that maybe with Caritas collaboration, we can work on together in the future in different aspects. So we are talking about a policy framework, or rather a concept framework that allows us to bring different aspects of the things that I talked about in the previous slide together in a more comprehensive way. For example, when we look at integration, we realize that integration spans across basically all policy sectors. And the challenge becomes, how do we bring all these aspects, all these policy aspects together to form a comprehensive whole that might be able to help us to see how well our integration is working. But the challenge now becomes, we have integration, we have security, we have housing and urban planning, we have social and health services, we have education services. So the challenges are so many. And the question then again becomes, how do we combine all these different aspects, different policy aspects together to form a complete whole? Let's see if I can be able to elaborate on that better. So in addition to being a concept, good relations is also a policy framework. And when we talk about good relations policies, we aim to promote equality and to promote diversity, because it also reduces the negative phenomena associated with social relations like discrimination, hate speech, segregation, and so on and so forth. So when we are speaking about this as a policy concept, we're thinking of it as something that can be integrated into each policy area, where we try and highlight what are the positive aspects that can help us drive certain aspects forward, and what are the negative aspects that we should be trying to get rid of in order to get positive results. And then thirdly, good relations can also be looked as a toolkit, simply as a toolkit that can be used by different actors that can implement it or use it when they're trying to implement different aspects or different steps in their own organization or in society in general. When we want, for example, to foster equality in society, we can use the good relations measurement framework to show how inequality is exhibited or existing in our society, which groups feel marginalized or segregated, and what can we do in order to bring more equality into society or include those groups into society. Let's go to the next one. I think I've confused you enough already, so let me try and break this down into more comprehensive bits. So the good relations measurement framework, and now we're talking about the framework, is built of 4 areas. We have attitudes, interaction with others, participation and influence, and a sense of security. And these 4 domains, despite being separated here in this slide, cannot be easily separated from one another. They intrinsically impact or influence one another. Attitudes, we do know that predominantly positive attitudes need to prevail in any society for good relations to exist. It is quite futile to speak about interaction or participation if there is hostility and negative attitudes between population groups in society. When we're talking about interaction, it is important that we have positive interaction, be it active or passive, between individuals and groups in any society for good relations to exist. When we're talking about participation, as I highlighted in previous slides, not only the availability of such opportunities to participate, but the awareness of equal opportunities to participate is pertinent in strengthening good relations. And fourthly, a sense of security. And here we are not talking about only individual or group security, we're talking about both physical and psychological security are very important aspects if we want good relations to exist. Let's go to the next slide. So those are the 4 domains of what we call good relations. I talked about different actors, bringing different actors together, looking at different actors' roles in society in improving good relations, and what we end up with is a more holistic, what we call in our work, an umbrella of good relations aspects or indicators that are applicable when we are trying to formulate policy, when we're trying to implement services or implement or build structures and services that are necessary in society. So the green, which is on your extreme right, is the attitudes, and the domains or the indicators that are on top of these 4 domains are interchangeable depending on the organization, depending on the work that's being done. So on the right, on your extreme right, we have attitudes, where we can have, for example, evaluations on value diversity, people's sense of trust, level of prejudice, or feelings of respect, that those indicators can be changed depending on the amount on the kind of work that you are doing. Then after that, we have security, as red, where we can look at, for example, awareness of rights, sense of physical security, for example, in your own neighborhood or in your own local area or region, experiences of discrimination, identity and acceptance. And then when we go to the next one, we have interaction with others, a sense of isolation, ability to interact with others, or experiences of such interaction. And then finally, at the very end, we have participation and influence, where we can have people's personal experiences of influence, interests to influence, or we could even have people's views on other population groups, opportunities to influence. For example, do we feel that particular population groups have more opportunities to influence than ourselves as a group or individuals? And at the very bottom, or right in the middle, let me go first, right in the middle at the local level, we can have different sectors. We can have schools, social and health institutions, libraries, leisure services. We can even have religious, places of religious and of worship. and the like. And then at the bottom, we have different actors. And I think it's important that despite this slide being produced quite many years back, me and my colleagues saw it fit to have religious communities as part of the key institutions that have a key role in improving good relations. Moving on. So I hope this concept of good relations somehow brought up some thoughts or ideas to your mind, because I'm going to be sliding on to the last few slides here. And I will be looking more closely at, so what about good relations? Well, the concept in itself is not very simple. It can be simple if you want to look at it in a very simple way, but it can also be very complex. And it's very challenging to bring so many aspects together in one framework, or one somehow attemptively comprehensive framework. This is the challenge that we have been facing over the last 8 years, and we have had to look at good relations mainly from particular policy areas. So either anti-discrimination work, integration improvement or advancement of the integration of migrants, internal security, equality, advancement of equality, so on and so forth. But despite that, we are trying to at least facilitate a constructive dialogue between different actors who might be, or hopefully might be, able to look at these different policy aspects through the same framework. And the hope is that at the end of the day, we have at least a similar way of looking at some of the challenges that we are facing. So, for example, the current government has decided that as it's drafting its own good relations policy, our action program, this action program should complement the soon to be drafted government action plan on integration. These two action programs or action plans should work side by side, because it is gradually being realized that, for example, integration on its own as a policy framework cannot work unless we influence other aspects of society that support the concepts that I talked about in the beginning: sense of belonging, trust, so on and so on and so forth. The other aspect that we have been trying to do is to create a more, or to encourage state and local authorities to set an example by utilizing this framework, by enabling conditions for meaningful interaction, dialogue, mediation in an environment where participants feel secure and equal. And a good example of this, as I mentioned earlier, was ethno. Sorry, I'm being biased here, but it's quite futile to talk about such concepts, frameworks, and ideas without having the practical tools and the practical examples of how these things are being done. Of course, we will have challenges: language barriers, knowledge of rights, access to information, willingness to take part, and so on and so forth. But this should not be a discouragement. This should encourage us actually to strive for better relations in society between population groups. Another aspect that the government or the state, local authorities could do is providing funding for actors on the ground. And I think this is something that Caritas has also been calling for over the years, especially when it comes to the advancement of equality and the support of people in disadvantaged positions. And if we could go back, if it's okay, if we could go back to the slide that I showed with the umbrella. If you look at the work that Caritas has done in support of people, especially in disadvantaged positions, there's many aspects that you can see that have been raised in the different statements and the different initiatives that Caritas has raised over the years. It would be a pleasure to work with Caritas as a partner in the future. The advisory board has a quite limited amount of spaces, but it doesn't mean that our collaboration will not be will not exist in the future. We will definitely be willing to work with Caritas on some of the issues that you have raised. So, next slide, and then the next one. So then what for the local actors? What should we do? Our encouragement is obtain information. There is a lot of research based on the indicators that were in that umbrella. There's a lot of research that has been done on many of the aspects that have been indicated in the umbrella. Lots of research has been done on integration, migration, health, education, attitudes, sense of security when it comes to crime or hate speech. And it is important to utilize this information and for different organizations to assess what does this mean in relation to the work that we are trying to do. Secondly, recognize the impact of the relations between population groups. What does this reflect in terms of how people exist, coexist? For example, it can be in an organization, in a parish, in a local community, or in the country as large. What are the stereotypes, social classes, social classifications, economic stratification or marginalization that's existing? And then thirdly, take into account the effect of the considered or applied decisions on population groups. So you have seen what is happening, you have recognized its impact, you have decided to take action. What are the effects of such action? What are the impacts of such action? The main impetus is to create a holistic view of society, be it at the local or national or whatever level. And it's important to remember that minorities do not live in an isolated setting. Their position in society depends on how the majority and other minorities relate to them. It's not about a majority versus a minority issue. This is also about a minority and minority issue. How do different populations relate? Relationships are reciprocal. People receive, people give. People have different attitudes towards each other, different population groups. And we need to keep on shifting what we see as norms and values and how we build inclusion and trust at a constant level. I hope my speech somehow gave you ideas of what we've been trying to do over the years. This is one of the, in my opinion, key developments that we've been working on over the years, and we hope that its use will continue over the years. Let's see how the currently drafted or current action program that's being drafted is going to be implemented, what resources it's going to be, what are going to be available for it, and we hope that we will have success while implementing the new action program. Those are my contacts. You can reach to me via email. If you have questions, inquiries, interest on this, I will gladly answer to you. As I warned, I won't use up all of the time, and I apologize, I'll have to run to another meeting, so I really hope that you enjoy this day and you have a very successful anniversary today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. I think, do you have maybe a few minutes if there is some questions?
Yes, I would gladly take a question. And sorry, I didn't say hi to the people online. Hi, everyone.
And also people online, you are allowed, and hopefully you do, also make some questions through Zoom. And if
Yes, we have one question. A number of research and surveys conducted from 2000 among the immigrant population so far have already repeatedly highlighted the language impediments, labor market biases, and subtle racism, among others. What new information is required to take impactful and visible action?
Very interesting question. Yeah, right on the money. Actually, as I said, the research does show exactly as the person who has asked the question. Especially in the labor market, there is quite lots of discrimination, especially in the recruitment part. What we're trying to do now is quite many initiatives. Where do I start? Let me start, for example, with the review of the entire integration policy. And I'll speak from a government perspective. Please, the person who asked the question asked me that. Forgive me for that. We came to realize that there's a need, first of all, to reassess the entire integration policy as it is. Our focus on integration based on employment, which has been the cornerstone of Finnish integration for the last forever, is a little bit problematic, especially for the reasons that I highlighted in this good relations model. We do encourage people to be employed. We do encourage people to go into language training and the labor market. But we have very little tools to address some of these issues that you're talking about. So one thing that we're trying to do is to work with companies and employers in shaping those norms that we think that are predominant. If somebody has, for example, a different name from Suominen, Tuominen, Makinen, whatever, it is most probably that you will not be called for an interview, let alone get employment. Actually, a research that was done, I think in 2018, shows that people with a Somali name had to apply 4 times more than a person with a native name in order to be called for an interview. So it is recognized. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to, not only through legislature, but through practice, to work with employers in diversity training, encouraging diversity training, in encouraging anonymous recruitment, in encouraging different diversity programs that will be able to somehow at least improve the norms and the attitudes in the employment sector, so that we can be able to get diverse labor markets into the Finnish labor market, into the Finnish working life. And that's just one aspect. So it requires like a total reassessment of what we see as integration. And that's also a very long and tiresome process. And I hope that we will be able to, at least in the current program, in the current government program, have a new integration act passed through, but that's a multi-year process. So in short, that. Thank you.
And here are a few other questions. Maybe we can put questions together, then
yes,
you can reply them as together. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to ask about how to recognize discrimination in the society. So what is being done regarding that so that we could help people actually to recognize those moments when the discrimination actually takes place, because I think we are many times lacking that, and that's not helping us to do something.
Oh, that's a good question. I'll answer that before we take another question, because I'll forget that.
That's fine.
Well, that's an important question, and I remember we probably 15, 20 years ago, we had a very strong anti-racism network, anti-racism work, but I think over the years, we've come to realize that fighting racism alone is not the solution. It is a problem, but it's not the solution. Discrimination comes in different forms and aspects. And what the surveys have actually shown, for example, the EU Mid-East survey that highlighted the discrimination experienced by people of African background in Finland, shows that it's not all the time the physical aspects that make you the victim of discrimination. It could at times be the assumptions that we have because of a different accent, because of people's own assumptions about what people can do or cannot do. So the biggest problem actually seems to be the norms, what we find as normal. What we find as normal is not saying a person of my color working in the Finnish Ministry of Justice. That is a norm. It's not discrimination, but that's the norm. So breaking those norms seems to be the most difficult part of discovering that discrimination. So don't feel bad saying that we don't realize it. Sometimes all we see is what is normal. And changing those attitudes, shifting those norms into something new is the most difficult. And I'll go back to the integration policy part, because that's one of the aspects that we work with very closely. Somebody asked a very interesting question. Finland is regarded as the happiest country in the world, and we celebrate that. Yay, Helsingin Sanomat, yeah, we walk around the world, yeah, we are the happiest, yeah. And then when the EU Media survey comes, it says that Finland is one of the most discriminatory countries in the world. And then we're like, no, this is not possible now. So we look at our integration policy and we should ask, okay, are we building an integration policy to invite people or to receive people into the happiest country in the world or the most discriminatory country in the world? And if you look at our integration policy at the moment, it has got a very temporary aspect to it. People are just here to work, to stay for a while. We are not ready to open the concept of Finnishness to accept what is different. The norm is that Finnish is this. This is Suomalainen. But we are not ready to open that, to expand that into something new. So those are the norms that we need to start changing in order to make a difference.
Thank you. And then Timo.
Thanks, Mr. Kariuki, for your very interesting presentation. And I use this opportunity as well to congratulate Carita on its anniversary. Carita is one of our member organizations. I come from Fingo, which is a number of organizations for Finnish development NGOs. On your slide, you just pointed out, the issues that might prohibit actually immigrant organizations to get involved in this sort of good relationship, framework and interface or interaction. And I think the word was willingness to take part, I guess. And I think our experience is that, because 10% of our members are actually immigrant-based organizations, that when you talk about the authorities, how to influence authorities, how to take advocacy work, how to lobby the ministries, they find it sometimes rather uncomfortable, even though they might be already Finnish citizens, they have lived in Finland, and they know their rights. That's not really the sort of knowledge issue. But they may come from the countries where the concept of state means a threat. Yes. And therefore, I think, you might need a kind of some steps there in between before they feel really comfortable to be accommodated in the forum, which is basically, as you said, under the Ministry of Justice. Yes. I guess you understand the dilemma.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. That's a very good question, and that's the truth. And I'll go back to the norms. That when you put the representatives of a small NGO, that might be the member of Fingo, for example, in the same room as the permanent secretary of the Ministry for Health and Social Affairs, and you try and tell these two individuals to work together as partners, it's very challenging. It's very challenging. The norm is we still have got these ivory towers where there's the state and then we have local actors down below. But my thought of creating an inclusive and participatory society is being able to sit on the same tables despite where you come from, be it NGO high level or state high level and local grassroots actors on the same table and discuss real issues that affect people on the ground. It requires also a cultural change in government in order to get people to think like people on the ground. When we are so used to thinking about policies and legislature a lot, it somehow takes us too far away from the realities on the ground. I personally believe, even though it's not good to express personal views as a civil servant, I might end up being in trouble. We need platforms where everybody who comes in on an equal footing. And you can be able to discuss, to air views without the fear of repercussions or the thought that you will not be heard because you come from the ground. This is a long process. This is not going to happen in one day. but what you have said is the reality of things. Sometimes it's not the willingness or the lack of willingness to participate. Sometimes it's the attitudes that will not allow people to want to participate. I won't come, we won't be listened to anyway. These issues have been decided already. It's quite useless to come and discuss these issues. And that's the thing that we want to get rid of. I'm not a politician, I'm a civil servant, and we work to serve politicians, but we try to create the best environments where everyone can be able to participate and get their views heard. Thanks, that was a good point. That's just the reality of things. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And is there still some question?
I can read out some more comments from our Zoom participants. Secretary General of Caritas Denmark thanks you for a brilliant presentation and sends you the warmest greetings from Caritas Denmark.
Thank you.
Also another comment, thank you for the illustrations. They open the good relations in a very beautiful level. And another comment, thank you for an excellent presentation, Mr. Kariuki. Very important topic.
Okay, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for having me. I apologize once again, I have to run, but I'm sure you'll have a good and successful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think before we go and give the floor to Maria, we have still a few topics what I want to share with you. I think this is now a good point to sort of look the faces who work now behind Caritas Finland today in our office. I'm the Secretary General, as I said. As Bishop actually said, only a few years ago we created this position as Secretary General. But I'm nothing without my team. So my team is who is actually doing the work. So I would like to introduce, where is Adriana? Actually, she went away. But we start with Sara. She works as a project coordinator in our office, everyday basis. Then we have Laura Järvilehto. She works as a communication and global works. And then there is Adriana somewhere outside. And she works as our organization coordinator. And these three ladies are there working every day in the Caritas office, and I'm, as a Secretary General, I'm only part-time worker there. But these are the ladies who are behind this seminar. Thank you so much. And also behind the everyday work, what we do domestic. And this is actually the biggest change what has happened past few years, that we are more and more doing domestic work and doing together work with our parishes, helping families, helping seniors, and doing different kinds of projects and trying to do what Peter Kariuki was saying here earlier, changing this environment to be more positive, more equal, and so on. But I think now we have some kind of video of what we want to share with you, what we have been doing in one project. Unfortunately, this video is only in Finnish, but it's all in all, it's about the global education, how we try to change attitudes, these norms, what are very strongly still in our society, and how we work against racism, for example. But now we'll look at the video. Thank you.
Puhu suomea. No julkiset kulkuvälineet, mitä mä oon lopettanut kokonaan käyttämästä, niin ja yksi syy siihen on just se, että jos istuu vaikka jonkun viereen metrossa, jonkun suomalaistaustaisen on nähnyt pari kertaa, kun he nousee mieluummin seisoo ja istuu siihen sun viereen, mä sitten tiedän niin pelottavalta vai mikä se on, mutta semmoisia asenteita huomaa ja sitten mitä maahanmuuttaja niitä huomaa, tai tulee opittua koko elämää ja niin semmoiset katseet, jotka niin, että niistä oikein näkee sen, että sua halveksitaan ja sua ei haluta tähän. Ne on semmoisia pieniä juttuja, mitä niin itse näkee ja niitä kiinnittää huomiota, mutta
Sorry about
Mikä oppinut hyväksyy.
problems.
Mutta sitten jos mä mietin itseäni maahanmuuttajia ja muita maahanmuuttajia, ketkä kokee sen jo, että tasa-arvon myytti mun kohdalla, että mä en koe sitä, että se toteutuu mun kohdalla, niin mä oon itse ehkä hyväksynyt niin kuin rasismin semmoisen asiana, joka vaan siellä on. Mä otan sen enemmänkin sellaisena, että no jollain on mielipide, että prove them wrong. Et sitä mä oon tehnyt koko mun elämän. En mä sit tiedä, onko se oikeudenmukaista, että mun pitää todistaa itteeni 20 kertaa vahvemmin muille. Vaan sen takia, että joku sanoo mulle, että sä oot sossukummi. Ehkä se mun elämän asenne on jotenkin muokkautunut sen kautta, että aika paljon mä töitä teen. Ihan sen takia, että mun ei tarvitsisi koskaan olla sellaisessa tilanteessa, että mä joutuisi hakea keneltäkään tukia. Mitä mä oon sanonut tosi monelle nuorelle, että muistakaa silti se oma arvo. Että sä päätät itse sun sisimmissä, kuka sä oot, arvoinen sä oot. Että ihmisten mielipiteet ja asenteet ei määrittele sua, vaan sun teot ja sinä itse määrittelet itsesi. Prove them wrong. Niin mä tein.
And I think we have in our websites, we have those videos all together. How many? 6? 3. 3 stories still what you can look what we were doing through this project, and these are the videos what are sent out to schools and where we can talk about these issues. But now it's time to give the floor to Denmark, to my colleague, Secretary General Caritas Denmark, Maria, and what we can hear about how the situation is in Denmark point of view. And this is what we hear also very often in Finland, that we are migration organization, we are the migration church. But now the floor is yours, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Can you hear me? Sound okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Bishop Sippo, Larissa, colleagues, brothers and sisters in mankind. I am very, very happy to be with you today. My name is Maria Hammershoy, and I am the Secretary General of Caritas Denmark. First of all, I want to extend my congratulations and my best wishes from everyone at Caritas Denmark to all of our Finnish colleagues. Huge congratulations on your anniversary. We are so happy that you are part of our Caritas family. I'm quite new in my position. I've only been here for a year. And luckily, my predecessor had already established a really good relationship with Caritas Finland, which I'm extremely happy to continue and to develop. So thank you so much for that, Caritas Finland. I also want to thank you for your huge contribution to our partnership with Caritas Jordan, in which we provide healthcare for Syrian refugees. That was a big contribution that you sent over Christmas. So thank you very much for that. I thought when I looked at the program that I am being sandwiched, you could say, between two very institutional speakers, Mr. Kariuki and my colleague Maria from Caritas Europe, who's following after me. So I thought what I would do was I would like to talk about some very hands-on projects that we do, how, you know, real living people who are welcoming people in Denmark. So I'm going to start to talk just a little bit about what is it that Caritas Denmark, what is the background of our work. And the Catholic Church in Denmark, as in most of the North, is basically a migrant church. After the Reformation, we didn't have freedom of religion. This was established in 1849. So for 300 years, there was no Catholic Church in Denmark. In 1849, when we had a new law and we had freedom of religion, there was about 1,000, it's estimated that there was about 1,000 Catholics in Denmark, and they were either diplomats or workers or spouses. During the time where it was, in essence, illegal to be Catholic, the ambassadors from Catholic countries, they built their private chapels inside their houses, and occasionally a priest or a bishop would visit and administer the sacraments. The location of the cathedral here in Copenhagen goes back to, it was actually the Austrian embassy where the Empress Maria Theresia had built a chapel, and that was kind of the center of Catholic life in Copenhagen inside the embassy. So when it was decriminalized to be Catholic, the church very slowly started rebuilding. As I said, there was about maybe 1,000 Catholics, and they were all foreigners. So in the beginning, the church was part of the German diaspora. Priests came from Germany, and it wasn't until 1883 that we actually had a bishop, and Denmark became a diocese. I'm saying all of this because it is in our DNA to welcome the foreigner. There would be no church without that. At the end of the 19th century, we had our first big migrant group who could practice legally in Denmark. They were Polish migrant workers working in Danish farms. And also slowly the different religious orders started establishing themselves in Denmark. And then Danish people slowly began to join the church and convert into the church. And the first, you could say, Danish stock of Catholics began appearing. So during the 19th and 20th century, the church in Denmark has been blessed with many new migrant groups, and they've all contributed immensely to the growth of the church and also the diversity of church life. In recent years, we've had a large group of Vietnamese refugees, big groups of Polish workers, Filipino workers, Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka, Chaldean refugees from Iraq, and refugees from Central Africa, primarily the Congo, Rwanda, Uganda. And that's just to mention a few. Also, I should say that by far most of our priests were born in other countries around the world. We are hugely grateful that these priests come to our country, because again, it would be an almost non-existent church if we had to rely on Danish priests. So for Caritas in Denmark, all these groups have been an absolute blessing, and they contribute so much. Now, while Denmark as a wider society has in recent years become more inward looking, and in fact, among our fellow NGOs, there's a decline in engagement and in collections. The Danes seem to, I don't think that they don't care about poor people or don't care about the wars around the world. I think in some ways it's just too much. But anyway, there is this tendency, and our other NGOs see the decline in engagement and in donations. But that is, lucky for us, absolutely not our problem. And this is, of course, because most of our volunteers and a lot of our the people who work here are migrants, are refugees, or they're children of migrants or refugees, or they're grandchildren of migrants and refugees. So they we don't have to explain to them why it's necessary to help people in other countries or to serve the poor. They're completely on board with that. So I wanted to give you some examples of real people and how this plays out in the daily life here. In Denmark, each parish has a Caritas representative who organizes the Caritas work in their parish. The variety of work done is immense. It very much depends on the people in the parish and the circumstances of the parish. Every parish have their own flavor, and they do what feels right for them in their parish. At the same time, they participate in the wider national Caritas work by organizing collections, participating in workshops, and so on. So my first example is Beatrice. Beatrice is the Caritas representative in Kalundborg parish, which is a rural parish about an hour and a half from Copenhagen. Beatrice and her family, that is her husband and their 3 children, they are originally from Rwanda, but because of the war, they fled to the Congo. From the Congo, they had to flee again and moved on to Tanzania, where they lived as refugees for 10 years until they, under a UN program, were given asylum here in Denmark. For Beatrice, her church has always been where she went for help, where she went for consolation, where she went for hope. During her 10 years in the Zambia, she was active in the local church. And when they arrived in Denmark, the family was overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity of the state. And of course, at the same time, they were welcomed in their local church. Beatrice, like all the refugees we have in Caritas, is very keen to share and to give back to the society that helped her. So as she says, when she had her first job in Denmark and she got her first payslip, she didn't look at how much money was put in her bank account, but she looked at how much money she had paid in taxes, because that was what made her proud. As the Caritas representative in her parish, she is very keen to help other families in Denmark, to teach them about life in Denmark, how things work in Denmark. She organizes this work herself and calls on other people from the parish when she needs help. The Caritas headquarters, we support her work financially. So, for example, when she wants to take a group of refugees, families to a museum, like, for example, the Viking Center, to teach them about Danish history, or some other educational excursion, we support her financially so that she can do that. Beatrice is a total powerhouse, and we're so happy to have her in the Caritas family. So another example I want to mention is Delphine. He's a Filipino guy who came to Denmark for work. For 30 years, he's been a loyal, hardworking employee at a hotel in Copenhagen. He's now retired, and while he originally meant to stay in Denmark only for a few years, but along the way he built a family here, his children grew up Danish, and Denmark has become his home. The Filipinos are among our most church-going groups, and the church has been Delphine's base for friendship and connection to his old country. When he retired, he experienced what a lot of our migrant workers tell us. After struggling in low-paid jobs in a country he didn't always understand, and with a language which he mastered, but which never really became a friend, for the first time when he retired, he found himself with time on his hands, and time for him, basically. He had always pictured retirement the Filipino way, which is to be taken care of in the midst of the family. But he came to realize that his children were more Danish than Filipino, and retirement was going to be something completely different than what he had always pictured in his mind. So he turned to his church and to Caritas to offer himself, his help, and his assistance. And what he does is he creates a gentleman's club within the Caritas, with Caritas support. Gentleman clubs where old guys like himself can meet and help each other through difficult situations. Loneliness is a big theme among retired migrant workers, and Delphine has offered himself to combat loneliness. He reaches out and he touches the heart of old men who had long forgotten they had a heart. And we are so happy and proud to have him in our Caritas family. My third example is Alina, a Ukrainian lady who came to Denmark for love. Alina represents the group of Caritas volunteers who are great connectors between people and nations. Alina joined Caritas with a wish to serve the poor. Seeing the material richness of the life she's now enjoying in Denmark, it seemed natural to her to use that in a way to serve the poor. And no matter what we are working on in Caritas Denmark, she puts in a huge effort to serve and to give relief for her human family. She has been brilliant in pointing to the rich cultural heritage, but also the material poverty of her home country. So for our Advent collections for Christmas 2018, the Caritas Denmark collection went to Caritas Ukraine to help poor families through the winter. Alina was working so hard on the awareness campaign, organizing film showings, Christmas bazaars, and the whole of the Danish Caritas family, and in a wider sense, all the parishes, went all in to support Ukrainian families. So again, Alina is a huge contribution to the Caritas family, and she helps us connect with families in other countries. Now, my final example is not a specific person, but a community, the Vietnamese community. Most of them arrived in the 1980s, and they're among Caritas Denmark's biggest supporters, both financially, but also in building awareness and advocacy about the plight of the poor. They're very happy to share their stories of escaping war and leaving old lives behind to build something completely new in Denmark. These stories are immensely important in our awareness building as most news about refugees are given to us through the media as numbers and political discussions. And it's very easy to forget that we're talking about real human people. As the Vietnamese group is so important and supportive of Caritas Denmark, we have made sure that they're also represented in our board. We have Chi, who is a young medical doctor. She's also a mother of 4, and she came to Denmark as an infant, and she's now of the utmost importance for our work. As a medical doctor, she has been involved in our work in Jordan supplying healthcare for Syrian refugees. We are also supporting the Jordanian government, the Ministry of Healthcare there, in developing quality healthcare systems. And when a study group from Jordan came to Denmark in 2019, she was among the organizers, and she was just a powerhouse of knowledge about the Danish healthcare system, which we could pass on to our colleagues in Jordan. So again, there would, to Caritas Denmark, this group is also extremely important. So one of the new, so I hope that with these examples, which are very, down to earth, and this is how it works for us. Of course, there are a lot of Danish Catholics, and they're equally hard workers within the Caritas family. But Caritas really does have a big role as integrators into the wider society. We are always trying to develop our work in new ways, and over the past year, we have come to realize that our poorest migrants are actually, well, as you know, Denmark has very restrictive immigration laws. So I'm slightly ashamed to say that we get very few new refugees and less immigrants than in earlier years when we were a more open society. So actually, at the moment, it seems that the poorest migrants that we have in Denmark are in our ports. They are working in the cruise ship industry, in the shipping industry, and in the fishing industry. And they're among the most marginalized, as we don't see them because they don't get to leave the ships. From our colleagues along the Scottish and English coast and along the German coast, we know that we have huge problems on a lot of these ships. Problems of abuse, problems of suicide, problems of social character, as a lot of the people working at sea are very low paid labor who are on 9 months contracts, which means that they don't get to go home for 9 months. And if the captain of the ship is not a good captain, 9 months is a long, long time to be isolated with a few colleagues at sea. So at the moment, we are working to establish ship visiting groups to go to the ports and visit the ships and reach out to the migrant workers on the ships to see if there's anything they need or anything we can do to help them. And a lot of cases has come to the media in Denmark in the last year. For example, 2 Ghanaian nationals were held practically as slaves on a fishing boat in the north of Denmark for 3 years before anyone noticed. The owner of the ship had taken their passports, and they were paid basically just enough to have food. And these are, and we have a lot of other stories like that. And so this is an area that we are going to work a lot more on. So I am going to finish and talk a little bit about how our work is part of our global work, because in Caritas Denmark, we work with other Caritases, but our major partners are Caritas Uganda, Caritas Niger, Caritas Burkina Faso, Caritas Myanmar, Caritas Bangladesh. And of course, with all these people, we share our wider humanity. But in many of the countries, we share something else as well, which is that we are in our countries a small minority group. In Denmark, we are very few Catholics. I mean, it's below 1%. I think we're about 40,000 altogether, maybe a bit more now because of migration, but it's in that area. But when we work with our colleagues in, for example, Niger, there are 2% Christians in Niger. In Bangladesh, it's 0.5% Christians. In Myanmar, it's about 5% Christians. And what we all experience is that even if we are very small minorities in our communities, we can actually, when we work together, we can punch above our weight. We can do so much for our wider human family in the countries we are in. And it makes me happy and proud of the Caritas family, which Caritas Finland, of course, is an important part of as well. I think that's basically what I would like to say to you today. I don't know if you have any questions.
Questions to Maria? Thank you so much. So I think it was the last Nordic meeting, what was in end of February, before all the board closed, and I'm so happy that we got the possibility to sit together and think those works together and projects together, which are still on the table in many cases. But thank you so much, Maria, about telling the stories and how the situation looks in Denmark. If you don't have any questions to Maria, no? Okay. So then we just say thank you, big thank you to you, and hopefully we can then continue with our project planning soon.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and huge congratulations on your anniversary and your work and everything. I saw that the program did not have a break between the early morning and lunchtime, so I thought maybe you need a break. Anyway, that's up to you. It was nice to see. I wish I could see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone, but bye-bye.
And before we go to the next speaker, to Maria Nyman, Caritas Europe, I think we all need, and so also a little pause. What do you think? So if, say 10 minutes, and then if you can come back here and then see you online as well in 10 minutes. Thank you. Then we continue. interesting morning and speeches already. And now we will continue to speak with Caritas Europa's Secretary General Maria Nyman soon. But before that, I have to say what Secretary General Larissa always does, is keep asking donations. We are very happy to have a lot of regular donation from a private persons and from different kind of association, but we still need them more. Please, there was the information about the donation for our anniversary. But I continue where Maria from Denmark stopped. Caritas is the voice of the people, and we notice different things in our society or in the politicians' speeches. And we try to pick up those, what is needed, what we can raise up. And so advocacy work is very important part and in our Nordic, in our Caritas family. And as often said, we are the voices of the people who cannot press themselves or say what is wrong with their own personal lives. And this is what we do. We have already taken part as Caritas Finland with this Caritas Cares report. And there is now every second year we are publishing a new report. And besides that report, we will have also sort of country reports. And our last country report was published a bit earlier than the Caritas Europe big report, because we had the EU presidency in that time. So we had, in October 2019, we had a seminar and we published the Caritas care report from Finland. And then I think it was in February then, Maria can correct me then, right, was then to publish the main report. And about that report, we are listening now what Maria is sort of presenting us. And I have to only personally say that we are very happy to be part of this Caritas family and this report process, because this is so important advocacy work, what we can raise up. Those stories, what Maria was from Denmark saying, those people's story, putting in the policy papers to put the message forward. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Larissa, and I hope you can all hear me well now. Yeah? Good. So, good morning to everyone and greetings from Brussels. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. I'm Maria Nyman, Secretary General of Caritas Europa, and I wish to start just by congratulating you, Caritas Finland, on your anniversary celebrations, and to thank you for the very good work. Thank you for welcoming me today, even if it's virtual. Thanks to Larissa, thanks to Laura, who have been supportive in ensuring that I would be able to come. I would have wanted to be with you in person, but travel restrictions don't allow for that, and that's really sad. But it's still a pleasure for me to be able to get to know you a little bit better, even if virtually today. And I take this opportunity to express my gratefulness and my admiration for your work. And even if COVID now keeps us distant physically, in our hearts we are together. So if you change the slide now, please. So I'm the Secretary General of Caritas Europa since 1.5 years by now, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to be coordinating the work that we are doing through our secretariat in Brussels. We have 15-person secretariat for the time being here in Brussels, and we ensure that the European institutions, such as the European Union, but also the Council of Europe, that they hear our policy demands, that they hear the messages that are brought up by the 49 member organizations across Europe in 46 countries. With 46 countries, you will understand that we are basically the large Europe. We are going well beyond the European Union. Basically, it's the Council of Europe countries, and it's one of the 7 regions of Caritas Internationalis, which has 162 member countries on board. And from our Brussels office, we are working a lot on advocacy, so bringing the political, contributing to the political debate at the European level. And our main areas where we do advocacy is, on the one hand, social inclusion and social integration. And that's where today's topic comes in first and foremost. We also do work on international development, on migration and asylum, and work on humanitarian action. But the other kind of work that we are doing is linked to capacity building of our members. So we are doing a lot of trainings, we are doing coordination between the members in the network to ensure that we really can support the network in all the work that we are doing. And the Caritas membership in Europe is really diverse. Our members work in different contexts, in different cultures, with different means, with different scope of work. But what I've been experiencing across the Caritas network in this time that I've been with you is that I've always felt the same spirit, joyful, empowering, hopeful, loving. It's really about faith in action. And I think this goes, I'm myself from Sweden originally, and knowing a little bit about the Nordic context and the Catholic Church in the Nordic context is very different from some of the other Caritas organizations. But I think wherever we are in Europe, indeed, this spirit and this sense of service and love for the people that we are working with and for is really shining through. So next slide, please. So I was invited to speak about our poverty reports, and I would have wished to pass it over to you in person, because we have them all printed here in Brussels. As Larissa said, this is reports that we are publishing every second year and focusing on different topics. And our methodology, not only for these reports, but for the work that we are doing in general as Caritas, is really to ensure that we start by listening to the needs of the people that we serve, of the people who are experiencing poverty, of the people in the most marginalized situations. And we listen to them about the possible solutions that they see also for coming out of poverty and exclusion. So it's really about this see, judge, act methodology. We start by listening and seeing what the people we are serving are, what their reality is. We analyze these needs, we analyze these acts, and when it comes to services, Caritas organizations are essential actors in helping people out of poverty, in combating social exclusion, in promoting social justice. And even if in Europe, many conditions are improving, labor market conditions are improving, vulnerable groups such as migrants, such as low-skilled individuals, such as people who are long-term unemployed, for example, they still face a lot of difficulties to enter the workforce. We also know that income equalities remain high. We also know that there is a number of new challenges with changes in demographics due to low birth rates, due to aging populations, as a result of immigration. And we know that universal access to quality services is essential in this fight against poverty and fight against social exclusion in Europe, as a means to allow for the respect of the dignity of the human rights in practice for the people that we are serving and the people that need those services. And there Caritas is an essential actor, because Caritas also ensure that the services that we provide, that a lot of the most excluded, most marginalized people, they have access to them thanks to the no threshold that Caritas has in general. You know, we are not starting to ask for the papers of the person and so on. It's a no threshold access in general of the Caritas services. And we know that member states with better service provision are also better equipped to address and to mitigate the crisis in their populations and the poverty among the populations. And this is also where Caritas Europa is trying to bring structural change by proposing changes in the national and European policies with and through our members, and also ensuring, indeed, thanks to the membership who are bringing up the voices of the people that they are serving, we can also allow for the participation of people experiencing poverty in the design and the implementation, in the monitoring, in the evaluation of the policies. So this is the basic on how we have been working to kind of create the Caritas poverty reports. So if you turn to the next slide, please. So we issued a report in February this year, so indeed after Caritas Finland, but early this year. Indeed, also before the COVID pandemic started to kind of really gain ground. And this report, so 2020 focuses on access to services, and it gives the situation, it gives a snapshot of the situation in terms of access to services in Europe. And it showed that access to services has improved since the financial crisis in 2008, but the access still remained problematic in many ways, in terms of availability of the services, in terms of accessibility of the services, affordability of the services, adequacy of the services. They are not always guaranteed or sufficient. So, and that was of course before the COVID pandemic, which has of course also worsened the situation quite substantially, and it still remains to be seen just how affected the people that we are serving are, and the access to services, how they will be affected in the longer run. Now, so what we did, we were analyzing the results from the 16 member organizations that were from 16 countries that were contributing to the report, and Caritas Finland was one of them. And we analyzed and described the people's access to 3 public services common to all of the participating Caritas organizations. These are the public employment services, housing policies, and early childhood education and care services. So in addition, each of the organizations of the Caritas members, they chose specific services to their national context, which they were analyzing and looking into. The 2 that were the most commonly selected were the services for migrants and asylum seekers and services for the homeless. So this report and also the national reports are available on our website, and you will see the link a little later. So if we change slides, please. So as I said, the input from the members were brought together through the European Caritas report, poverty report. It looks at these 3 words starting on A, the adequacy, the accessibility, availability, and affordability of the services to the people experiencing poverty. And it also looked at the promotion of social inclusion in the European countries. And from this analysis, the report tries to identify the concrete causes of poor access to services experienced by people in the most vulnerable situations or the most precarious situations in our society. And we also make some recommendations to the policymakers to show how you can guarantee access to services for all. And I will come back to a couple of these recommendations a little later as well. It calls for incorporating the social rights of all the citizens in Europe, all the people in Europe, and we call for stronger policies to ensure dignified living for all. So adequacy, what is that? It's about ensuring that a service is of good quality, that it's satisfactory, that it's responding to the needs of the user, so that it's fit for purpose for the individual needs. Accessibility, it's about can an access, it might be existing, but is it easily reached or obtained by the person in need? Is it easy to understand? Is it easy to use the service? And then the availability of the services. So does the service exist at all? And is it available for those who need it? Because, and again, Caritas services often have a low or no threshold, but that's not the case for all services and definitely not all public services, depending a bit from one country to the other. And about the affordability, so even if the services are there, even if they're adapted to the individual needs, are they affordable for the persons who need them? And for our target group, of course, the people in the most vulnerable situations and the people living in poverty, this criteria is really essential. So if you speak about access to services, you need to ensure that these 4 elements are there. It's not enough to say that, there is a service. So next slide, please. In Europe, in 2017, and these are the statistics of Eurostat, so it's only covering the European Union countries. So 113 million people lived in poverty or social exclusion in 2017. So that's around a fourth of the population in the European Union. And if you look at the numbers, here compared 2009 and 2017, you will see the red numbers. They are a little higher than the numbers in 2017. So the poverty has in general decreased in Europe slightly. You will see that Finland is actually second on this list. So the number of people experiencing poverty would be lower in Finland than in most of the other European Union countries, only beaten by Czechia in this graphic. Czechia has an extremely low number of unemployment, and I think that's the main reason. But now, of course, I think these numbers, it will be very interesting to see the next statistics, because the COVID pandemic has, of course, again, increased the number of people living in poverty in Europe and worldwide. So next slide, please. So 113 million people living in poverty or social exclusion in 2017. And you saw that the numbers were decreasing. But you also saw that they were not decreasing a lot. In almost 10 years' time, 1.5 million of people were lifted out of poverty in Europe, in the European Union. But that's very far from the targets that the EU has been setting for 2020, which is to lift 20 million people out of poverty. So 1.5 compared to this 20 million target. And I think that's really a tragedy that we have not come further. We see positive signs. I was mentioning some: increasing employment rates, decreasing unemployment in most countries. But again, these numbers are from pre-COVID, and I think it remains to be seen now in the months and the years ahead how it will be affecting. We already see how many people are so badly affected about the pandemic. the people living in poverty being the first victims. In general, overall, we see that labor market conditions improve, but we see that the income inequalities are very high. And even people who have a job are living in precarious conditions, are facing precarious conditions often, and have a difficulty to make end meets by the end of the month. So next slide, please. So what about the access to services in Europe? And I was mentioning that this Caritas Cares report, we're looking into some specific services. Public employment services, which is a very essential service to ensure that people have support in gaining access to the employment market. The main obstacles that our members were reporting to us is the administrative barriers. Often it's quite a challenge administration-wise to using these services, to accessing these services. And there's often, many of our members were mentioning that their service users were saying that there is a lack of a personalized and caring approach when you come to and ask for support for employment services. There is often an issue with language barriers. I mean, people with a migrant background might have issues with language barriers, and also there is often an issue with recognition of skills of migrants. And I think there we have a long way to go still in Europe to ensure not only between the EU countries, where it's improving in terms of recognizing the skills of one another, but when it comes from people from outside of the European Union, this is definitely a much higher issue. You might come with a diploma which will just not be recognized in the country where you're coming to. And there's also lack of access in rural areas. Public employment services are often available in the urban areas, but in the rural areas it's much more challenging. Next slide, please. And in terms of access to housing services and housing, one of the main obstacles is the costs for housing. For many people, it's just taken a too big part of their income. And there is also, for the people who need public housing support, there's often an issue with inadequacy of the public housing services. There is also a lack of availability of social and public housing services, and there is a move towards more private options in many countries. Now, I think, now especially in the current pandemic, the situation is quite dramatic. Also, during the lockdown in Europe, there was a move, which was quite a positive move, to ensure that the people who were homeless would get access to shelters. Now I think it will be an extremely crucial point in time to see how can we ensure that the people who were homeless are not again coming back to the streets. And I know that in Finland, you're actually one of the positive examples. Often mentioned that with your housing first approach and so on, you have come quite far in terms of ensuring that people are not facing homelessness, and that people have access to housing. I don't know how you have been impacted by the pandemic, and that's maybe something you can come back to in the discussion. But indeed, this is not the same in many other areas of Europe, and access to housing remains a very problematic issue. So next slide, please. In terms of access to early childhood education and care, there is a lot of issues. And again, it's the people who are the most vulnerable and living in poverty that have the biggest access barriers, and who possibly also have the biggest needs to ensure that there is early childhood education and care services available. There is a lack of places in the kindergartens across Europe. This is what our members have been reporting back to us. Of course, in some countries it's better than in others. There is often conditions put to allowing for parents to put their child into early childhood education and care, such as in some countries there is a requirement that you should only use these services if you have a job. If you don't have a job, you are supposed to be able to stay at home with your children. But obviously, again, the people in the most vulnerable situations, the people who might be striving to get a job, or who might be striving to ensure that they, through integration services, language courses, and so on, that they can, do what is needed in order to access a job. They are often the ones who are penalized by this, and they cannot, in many countries, put their children to daycare. And I think this, again, it has also been showing during the pandemic in many countries in Europe how it might have been possible, for example, to ensure that the people, many people can be working remotely. When the schools were closed down, there were solutions because you could be working remotely, or because you had the means to offer other kind of solutions. But the persons in the most poor situations, and the persons, they had to go to their workplaces because there was not the opportunity to work remotely. They were again facing the most challenging situations because of this, and no proper place to put their children. And there's also the issue of affordability. And I think the Nordic countries might be better off there, but in many countries in Europe, and including in Belgium, where I am living, the affordability of the kindergartens is really an issue. It can be excessively expensive, which means that many persons will actually choose not to put their children to the kindergarten because it will just be more costly for them to do so than if they would take up a job. So they would prefer to have them at home. Next slide, please. In terms of the services for people who are homeless, there is a problem with the availability of services. This was not improving with COVID either, because obviously the number of places in shelters, they had to be diminished in many places, because you had to ensure the social distancing. So you couldn't allow for as many persons in the shelters. There is also a lack of information for people who are homeless, and there it's essential with the outreach services and so on to the people who are homeless to ensure that they are aware about the services that actually exist. But this information is not always reaching out, and again, it's the people who are in the most vulnerable situations, the people who are often also not kind of living in the people who don't have documentation, who are kind of invisible in the system. These are the persons, of course, who are the most difficult to access the information they need for accessing the services. There's an issue of accessibility in terms of there's often conditions for allowing someone into the homeless services. Conditions in terms of not using drugs, and so on. So accessibility is another issue, and the requirements on the users, indeed, that there are expectations on how on them in order to be able to access the services, and this is not always so easy. And there again, I think that Finland is a good example with the housing first model, which I think many countries could learn from you about. So the next slide, please. So there is a lot of that is better. I was mentioning that the numbers were decreasing in terms of people living in poverty, and that access to employment and so on is growing better. But the situation for people in the vulnerable situations is still immensely challenging in Europe. And we are in the midst of the corona pandemic. I was mentioning it earlier, and I'm mentioning it again, it has an enormous impact on Europe and on the whole world. It's affecting the people that Caritas serves immensely. And I think we have a key role to play to ensure that no one is left behind truly during this pandemic and in the aftermath. As in any crisis, it's the people in the most vulnerable situations that are the first victims. And they are the ones that are facing the most severe consequences of the crisis. And at the same time, it's been so clear, I think, having followed the work of Caritas throughout Europe during this pandemic, that Caritas has really showed that you stand with the people in the most challenging situations. You have been with them throughout, and you continue to be with them. And at Caritas Europa, we have been carefully monitoring the developments of the COVID-19. The expected short-term consequences, long-term consequences, and mid-term consequences. And we continue to advocate on behalf of the people in the most vulnerable situations. We are focusing on the needs that are arising from the crisis. And we are calling on the governments and on the European institutions to not leave anyone behind as they respond to the crisis through their policies and through their financial measures. And we have also been calling to ensure that the crisis shouldn't be contributing to additional stigmatization of the people who are already marginalized. And the motto of the Caritas family throughout the pandemic has been Caritas doesn't close, obviously as a reference to the lockdown that took place in big parts of Europe. We responded by saying that Caritas doesn't close. We continue to serve the people. And it was fantastic to see how the services of Caritas were adapted. They were adapting to the situation, and I think that these adaptations were not easy, but there was an immense willingness to do what it takes to support the people we are called to serve as Caritas. And there has been a very big sign of solidarity in many countries as well. But despite these positive signs, it's become clear that the crisis has led to dramatic consequences already, and inequalities are on the rise, and the number of people living in poverty are just likely to increase dramatically. In a very short period of time, the people have faced difficulties to live in dignity. And many people stand without social security and proper safety nets. But also the social service providers, such as Caritas, have been impacted by the crisis. So the people have been impacted, but also the social service providers, such as Caritas, which of course also makes the access to services even more complicated. We have had to face cuts, we have had to face increased expenses, we have had impacts on staff and availability of staff and of volunteers, because many of the volunteers of Caritas across Europe are people who are in situations of risk because of their age, for example. Caritas relies to a quite big extent on volunteers who are often above 70 and are thus in a risk group. So I'd say that the crisis has proven us right in terms of advocacy messaging. It's shown, unfortunately, in a very sad way, what happens when people are left behind, when inequalities persist, when the social protection systems are insufficient, when we don't invest in social services. The crisis has shown what happens when that's the case. And the crisis has also shown how essential the inclusive measures in integration of people are. And if we want to move out of this crisis, we have to address this, and we have to finally build the just society. And I'm very concerned that some of the financial recovery instruments right now that are intended to focus on getting society back as it was, rather than building a new sustainable society. I mean, we have seen that root causes that led to this crisis haven't been properly addressed. We have seen more investment to save the aviation industry than we have seen to lift people out of poverty. or to lift people out of situations of marginalization. So we have to build new, we have to build inclusive, we have to build sustainable. We cannot build the same again. We cannot try to go back to what it was, because clearly it wasn't sustainable and clearly it wasn't working. And this is where our role as Caritas will be essential in the months, in the years to come. And I think it's a window of opportunity for us, and we must use this window of opportunities. So also I think the crisis has taught us about the importance of crisis preparedness. We work hard on this since long in international development, but I think crisis preparedness also showed us that, you know, this is also an issue for our societies in Europe. I mean, in Belgium, where I am living, in Sweden, where I come from, and I don't know how it has been in Finland. I think you have been better off than in Sweden, but a lack of knowledge of existing crisis plans, they led to the fact that thousands of older people were dying in care homes. They could have been protected. And the fact that they were not protected, it's a tragedy. And our services as Caritas, again, that have a low or no threshold, because, I mean, public services are often limited to groups of people in certain conditions, such as homeless people, asylum seekers, in certain stages of the asylum procedure. But we are also offering services to undocumented migrants and so on. So, I think you can change the slide, please. So now, as Caritas, we shall be hopeful, and there are opportunities ahead, of course. And there are some going on at the European level of importance right now. One is the European Union has as one of its main missions, of course, to create to support the creation of quality jobs. And one of the files that is currently on the agenda of the European Union is the proposal for a common set of rules in terms of minimum income. And we are very much calling as Caritas Europa for this instrument to be binding, which is currently very much up to discussion within the European Union institutions, but we will keep our advocacy up. And in any case, something will come out, whether binding or non-binding, which will be a tool for promoting minimum income schemes across Europe. At the European level, there is also work on investment in younger workers and also in older workers. And there is this proposal, again, being discussed right now about a child guarantee. So the European Commission is supposed to present a clear proposal in 2021. This child guarantee instrument would be a means to ensure that children in situations of poverty would have access as a condition throughout Europe to free health care, free education, free early childhood education as well and care, decent housing, and adequate nutrition. And would this instrument be then finally adopted, and we are very much working for this, that would already be an essential means as well to lift people out of poverty, because investing in children is one of the most important things if we want to break the cycle of poverty. There are a number of other initiatives going on as well, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but in terms of access for services, I think it's important to know that that there exists a framework on social rights at the European level called the European Pillar of Social Rights. And they are currently preparing in the European Commission the action plan for the implementation of this pillar. And it has a number of aspects that are linked to access to social services. And we are very much supporting and monitoring this process as well. Another key file for us right now is the forthcoming European budget. The budget is supposed to enter into force in 2021, and you may have seen that there are lengthy and complex discussions at the level of our governments right now about this future budget. And we have been fighting hard to ensure that the European Social Fund is not cut. that it's not diminished in terms of amount, that it really allows for supporting the inclusion of the most deprived people, and that it's a means for investing in social services. And of course, we do all this advocacy work supported by the members, so with the voice of the people experiencing poverty included. So next slide, please. So what about the challenges? Because there are many. I was mentioning the challenges for the people experiencing poverty, but there is also a number of challenges for the service providers themselves, such as Caritas across Europe. So now I think one can say that the COVID crisis, it has only deepened the existing, so the challenges that were already existing, they have been made much deeper because of the crisis. I think that whilst the social service providers have played an essential role throughout the crisis, they have at the same time been immensely impacted by the crisis. The lockdown, the quarantine, the social distancing restrictions, they made it difficult to provide services face-to-face. And an increasing number of beneficiaries that rely on the services for the support of with their businesses, they were closing, there were jobs being lost, working hours being reduced. So the number of people who went to Caritas and to other social service providers, they were increasing during this pandemic. So there has also been a lack of investment in social services, and I think there is a lack of recognition of social service providers by the policymakers and by our governments. I think social services is unfortunately not considered enough as essential services. Essential services at the European level is considered access to electricity, access to water, and so on. But access to the social services are preconditions for lifting many people out of poverty and for allowing for inclusion, allowing for integration, allowing for a life and dignity. And by not investing in these social services, you are not investing in people, and you are not contributing to the empowerment of people, and you are not allowing for them to be lifted out of poverty. So investing in social services, recognizing social services as essential, that's really important. We also know that access to quality services, it's a means for fighting poverty and social exclusion. And we know that the member states that have better service provision, they are better equipped to address and to mitigate the consequences of the crisis. So it's also in their interest to ensure that they're investing in social services. And the social services continue to be severely impacted by the pandemic, of course, because of the public health situation itself, but also because, I mean, service provision, the costs have been increased during this pandemic because the numbers of people asking for the services have increased, but also the costs for providing the services themselves have increased, such as protective equipment, extra staff costs, costs for adapting services, moving from the face-to-face to virtual services and so on. It's all been increasing the costs. So the costs were increased, but the income were decreased for many social service providers. There was a lack of donations. And I think for an organization such as Caritas, it was particularly much sensed that you got the donations decreased because the pandemic was, at least in many places of Europe, in the worst phase during Lent, which is a period that very many of the Caritas rely on very heavily for donations for their work. And since churches were closed, the donations were definitely going lower, and since there couldn't be any outreach, you couldn't go and do collections in public, this was severely impacting our members. So the sustainability of service provision is really threatened, and if we are not addressing this, it's the people in the most vulnerable situations that are the first victims of that. So I think this is more or less what I wanted to talk with you about today. You can go to the final slide. You will see my email address. You will see the Caritas website, where you will also be able to find the poverty reports, the European report and the 16 national reports, also including the report from Caritas Finland. So thank you again so much and congratulations. And I'm with you in spirit and in my heart and in my prayers. And I'm so sad I can't be with you in person, but it's for next time. And I wish you a wonderful day and celebrations. And I'm here if there are any questions. So thank you. I think you can stop the screen sharing.
Thank you so much, Maria. Do we have any questions, comments, what you would like to share? Timo?
All right, a second time, sorry if I don't steal anyone else's time. Thanks, Maria. Lots of food for thoughts, how to explain the world in 50 minutes, I guess. But I have two questions to you. First of all, when concerning the international development, and have you identified in your analysis, because I'm sure that Caritas Europe has a strategy for its advocacy work, that what are the themes actually where you think there is a momentum building up, where you can really have a reasonable impact on having a structural changes? Is it trade? Is it investments? Is it traditional development cooperation, or what? I would love to hear whether you've got any thoughts on that. And secondly, I think, and this is just to second your analysis, that as well, I think when looking at the thing from the Finnish perspective, it seems that under the COVID-19 restrictions, the main focus has been how we're gonna support the private sector, which is of course important, but I think social sector and people's social well-being has been in a way perhaps sidelined. Thanks.
Maria?
Thank you very much for the question. I think of course the response is big. I mean, I think the crisis has taught us so many things, and I think one of the things it has definitely taught us is, and which is something that Caritas and the Church has said since long. And I mean, to me, for example, the Laudato Si encyclical of Francis is kind of a prophetic voice showing us the situation that we are in now. Everything is interconnected, and if we want to address the situation we are in, we cannot leave anyone behind. We have to ensure that we are investing. Cost cutting is not enough. It's also about inclusive investment now to ensure that, and in solidarity. And I think that one thing I've been quite concerned about is that while there has been a lot of solidarity in Europe during this crisis, we have been closing ourselves a little bit for the external world. We have been seeing that we are facing so big issues ourselves, and they have to be addressed. But we cannot overlook the global solidarity. So I'd say that international development is more important than ever. And obviously now with the discussions on the EU budget, the funding instruments to rescue Europe from the crisis, they cannot be taking away the funding that were for international development, because we are not only because it's not a means for solidarity, but also because it's not a mean for rescuing society. We cannot, if we are to be saved, it's saved together, and we have to stay in solidarity internationally about this. But this is just part of a much wider response. I think another lesson learned is also that investing in employment is only one means for lifting people out of poverty. There has been a very big focus on employment support from the side of the European institutions to rescue people out of this crisis. There has been this Corona investment initiative by the European Union, which has been a lot used for employment services, which are very important, but they are not enough. If we want to have an inclusive society, we need to ensure that there is also investment in social protection and social inclusion measures, and including in social service provision. So no, that's a very kind of general answer for a huge question, and of course there's much more to say, but I think I'll stop there. But your thoughts are welcome too, of course.
Yeah, very important point, because we need also the international work. But also I want to remark that already before COVID, we raised the problems that there are many people who are left behind in our social services. Also when they are in Finland, great, we still can see that you drop there easily, especially when you are foreign speaker, or you are migrant backgrounds, or you are refugee, or especially when you are undocumented person or something, then you will be easily left out. And this is what we see, a very huge issue what is coming now with COVID, that this is getting worse. It's not getting easier. It was not easy before COVID, but it will be definitely more difficult than after this. And what Peter Kariuki was saying already in earlier is that we have still a lot of norms, issues and reasons, being a foreigner or looking different and speaking different languages. So there we will have also huge problems coming. But I think there are some other questions as well, or do we take something from through chat? Is there? No, but there is Eli is raising a hand. So please have a question or comment.
Okay, thank you, Maria. My name is Elie El-Khouri and I am a vice president for Caritas Finland. So thank you again for a good presentation and about the statistics and all the numbers, what you give it for us. And also I am worrying about that homeless people. This is a big challenge for Caritas Europe International and also for Caritas Finland. And also, by the way, in the Helsinki region, for example, we have more than 8,000 people living on the street. And that's a big challenge for Finland. And the majority of them, they are living in Helsinki. So what kind of your plan or Caritas Europe strategy for that problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, I mean, the people living in homelessness are one of the most important target groups for Caritas members as well, because they are the most vulnerable and often difficult to reach populations in Europe. And indeed, with the pandemic, we have seen that the challenges are just growing. I think from the side of Caritas Europa, the issue is a little bit that there is not so much from a political perspective that can be done through European Union action. There can be support actions, there can be coordinations between members, but a lot is in the hands of the members at the national level. So I think the Caritas network at the national level, they have an immensely important role to play. I think one of the things that we can do as Caritas organizations is that since we have access often to the people who are left out and who are invisible in society in general, such as homeless people, who are really among the most invisible of the invisible people in terms of people know that they exist, but there is very little connection and integration and inclusion of those persons. And I think as Caritas and providing services, we can hear firsthand from the persons. And I think allowing for that voice to be brought to the policymakers, that is our mission. We have to ensure that we give them a voice. We give the voiceless people a voice. in the policy discussions. Now we are partnering as Caritas Europa with the Fianza, which is the homeless organization in Europe, and we are supporting their actions. But again, I think a lot is in the hands of our members at the national level, and please continue to stand by their side and continue to bring up their voice, because it's a group that is not heard. And I think one of the things that would be a tragedy is if we now, after the COVID crisis, when many people got at least provisional protection, people who are homeless were given temporary protection to ensure that they were not out on the streets during the lockdown in Europe, and ensuring that they are not brought back to the streets. I think this is the moment to, because you can't do that. You can't allow a society as ourselves to again, having solutions and then again putting people back to the biggest exclusion and segregation that there is. So I don't have the answers, but I think together we have to put the pressure to ensure that this is just not an option to allow for people to go back to the streets.
And this is, if I can shortly comment, Maria mentioned many times that we have this housing first model here in Finland, which is very good and practical, that you are giving roof for the homeless people, but only if you are registered in Finnish and if you have the right to have the social services, then it's no problem. But if you are beside the social services in different kind of reasons, then you are in trouble. And these are what we try to raise up over and over again, that we need also services for those who are not registered in Finland in regular basis. And this is, and also those people we cannot left behind. And this is what I think, as Maria said, we keep raising the voice for those people. Thank you. Is there any other questions, comments? Maila, please.
Maybe this is far-fetched, but is there any work from the side of Caritas to try to stop the immense weather change on the globe, around the globe, and the heat on Africa in the middle, and where people can no longer live because of the hot weather, and they migrate to north. So that's why we have the people from south. That's my question.
Thank you for this question. It's not far-fetched at all, because indeed it's very clear that, whilst Caritas' main mission, or Caritas' mission, is to stand by the side of the people in the most vulnerable situations, the people who are the first victims of the climate change and of the environmental crisis are exactly the people that we are serving. The people in the most vulnerable situations are the first victims. We see, due to climate change, that the number of people who are facing humanitarian emergencies due to natural disasters is just increasing immensely. Even in Europe, we see more and more floodings. So what we are doing is to respond to this, and what we are doing, to respond to this in order to serve the people. So we are always addressing, and more and more we are realizing that you cannot work on combating poverty and exclusion if you're not working on the root causes that led to exclusion. And today, unfortunately, climate change is one of these root causes. So if we want to address this, then indeed we have to address the environmental issues. So we are doing that more and more as Caritas. I think some of the Caritas organizations are further ahead than others, but as a confederation, we are taking it on now more and more, and we are working with the partners also in the environmental field about this. But not so much, our end mission is always to save the people, and the planet is their home. So the first mission is not to save the planet, but since it's the home of the people, it becomes part of the mission to ensure that we are not destroying our common home. So that's a little bit how we are working on that, and it's becoming a priority more and more for the whole Confederation. So thanks for this question.
Thank you very much, and I think it's our time to sort of stop also this discussion at this point. Thank you so much, Maria Nyman, that you were with us this morning. Thank you for your excellent presentation. It was very opening.
And congratulations again.
And thank you. And I think we go for the next speaker, our last speaker, if we want to make some last remarks. Elie, come here. And no, you have to come because the camera and because all the Zoom. I have here. Oh, okay, you take. And these are also, as Timo was saying, we are not only doing the domestic, we are still continuing very much in the international work. These are what we are doing now. This is where we are starting now with the foreign ministry money. We are starting a new project in Kenya, and these are actually what we have been doing. So this is what we have been working in Kenya and in Indonesia. We will also continue, and in Colombia. And we have been working a lot with the food issues and also with the environment and also the equality and also with the youth. These are the projects going on now. But now I am not stopping anymore. So please, Elie, the floor is yours.
All right. No problem. That field is mine because once a week, every week, I do a presentation here for our new entrepreneurs. My name is Elie El-Khouri, and I am from Nuko, Helsinki, and I'm a business advisor here in that building. So shortly, maybe, okay, second. Shortly about Nuko, Helsinki. Can you push one more? No, back. Okay, keep it like that. So Nuko, Helsinki is owned by Helsinki City. Nuko, Helsinki advisors, all they are as City Helsinki workers, employees. So our payment come from Helsinki City. We have two double ones. First is the business advisoring. The second is the advisor system for the grow up and the new entrepreneurs. We give all kind of advising and the courses, online services, and so on. That shortly, because we have short time, I will give you the last speech of this presentation. So I will tell you shortly about myself, how I came to Caritas. First, I used to be a board member on the Uudenmaan Liitto. Yeah, we had a conference or seminar once, and Larissa, she came and asked me, "Hey, Elie, you are a Catholic." I said, "Yes. Can you help us?" "In what?" "Can you be a member for Caritas?" That point, it came to my mind, the same sentence before nearly 30 years in my village in Beirut. Caritas chairman, she came, a lady, to me, she said that, "Hey, Elie, can you help us?" Same sentence. I was surprising that time. I said to Larissa, "Okay, I can think about it." Second time we had a meeting, I was the board chairman of the immigrant in Helsinki. It's a politic group. So also Larissa, she was there invited for that seminar. She reminded me, "Don't you want to come? We have a meeting after tomorrow." I said, "Yes, I come." Because she asked me twice, I feel that there is a message behind of that. So now I am here, Vice Chairman of Caritas Finland. Thanks for Larissa. Thanks for our group, the board members. We have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 board members here. Without you, we don't have that Caritas like that what we have. With a small group of people, we do a big and huge income for Finnish and for all the world. As, can you change it? As Bishop Teemu, in the beginning, he mentioned a lot of things about the Caritas activities. In Finland, the most important is charity in trust. Can you go for the second? And he mentioned also charity with equalities. Can you go for the third? It was charity with love. Those 3 things, they are the teaching of our Catholic church teach. Remember, love is the most important. That's a message come from our teacher, our God, Jesus in English. Can you go for the front? Before that, go back. There's a lot of things, that's my presentation, but because it came a lot of that during that event. Second things about that Denmark Caritas, and before that INTO. Also, I used to be a member for INTO group 10 years ago, and I was as an advisor for the entrepreneur there. So it's so clear for me, that presentation, and I understand his point of view very well when he mentioned that it used to be difficult for non-Finnish name who want to apply for a work in Finland, but it's not the only one thing. There is many things behind of that. It's not only the names, there is many things else. But we don't speak about that. Thanks for the INTO presentation, and thanks for the Caritas Denmark. When she mentioned a lot of things, activities, we have a lot of similarities. Actually, in Finland, we have a young Caritas. That young Caritas, they do a lot of work for the Caritas in Finland, and they help old people, and they share food from the shops and all the restaurants. By the way, that the last presentation, it was a very useful presentation actually for me, because she mentioned about the solidarity, and she mentioned a lot about the statistics. Those statistics, they are nearly similar to our Caritas Finland here, the same problems in all Europe. So I wish like we have a lot of a lot of messages coming from Caritas Europe and Caritas Denmark. So I don't want to use your time. I hope you to celebrate today 60 years for Finnish Caritas. You will come, and we hope you also to be safe from that COVID-19, and see you again maybe after 10 years or in 2 weeks. Yes, you will come. You will come. Thanks. If there is any questions, can you put the last? If not, so we finish for today and now. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Laura will say something.
We don't have any questions, but we have some comments and congratulations from Zoom. From the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church, they are congratulating Caritas and wishing us blessing for our work. Oh, we do have one question too. Well, I will read the congratulations first. Thank you, Maria Nyman, for a good speech, and thank you, Caritas, for valuable work for human dignity. Finnish Ecumenical Council congratulates Caritas in Finland. May God bless you and your important work. With our warmest greetings from the Council. Then also Philoxenia ry wants to share a poem for 60 years old developing Caritas Finland. We are sorry that this is only in Finnish. Philoxenia ry onnittelee psykiatri Claes Anderssonin runolla Suomen Caritaksen upeita vastuunkantajia ja yhteistyökumppaneitamme suurella sydämellä tehdystä työstä. Meistä tulee ihmisiä, kun joku koskettaa meitä. Hiuksista tulee ihmishiuksia vasta, kun joku silittää niitä kädellään. Hymy näkyy vasta, kun joku kuulee sen. Ihotta meillä ei ole sielua. Kun joku koskettaa, hän tosiaan koskettaa meitä. Meistä tulee todellisia vasta, kun joku on koskettanut. Ihmiskasvot elävät vasta, kun joku on koskettanut niitä käsillään. Piittaamaton ei piittaa, ei kosketa ketään. Kukaan ei ole ikinä koskettanut häntä, josta on tullut piittaamaton. Hänestä tulee ihminen vasta, kun joku on hyväillyt häntä käsillään. Claes Andersson teoksessa Ajan meno. Okay, and I will read out the question we have here. How do we feel when we work in, for example, Kenya and Indonesia? Every year, just as other organizations do, and there is no meaningful change in the lives of the disadvantaged groups. International NGOs have been supporting developing countries since the 1970s, and their situation is about the same. The change trajectory in Finland, Singapore, and the Gulf countries like UAE took about 1 decade to have visible and sustainable change. Are we just doing something that we do not understand? Because we are not creating sustainable impact in the countries that we serve. In Finland alone, many immigrants need more help in the workplace, against racial profiling, etc. We have beautiful reports, but for the meaningful change, we have to use a toothpick to choose a success story that we can sustain beyond a decade. This is a question for all presenters. What are we not doing right? And also, congratulations to Caritas Finland for celebrating the 6 years milestone.
Thank you for the question. I think these are the tricky ones, sort of, because every NGOs are sort of struggling with the same things. We want to help. We help because there is a need. There are changes happening. There are projects are changing. We have helping a lot of people through different kind of projects past many years in many NGOs. But there is still work to do. We need to continue, and when we are looking at sort of from the side that what we are doing wrong and what is changing, there are many little stories, little successful stories which are changing, but of course it can sometimes seem that nothing is changing because we keep going on with the projects. I think that's the answer for that. In the individual levels, we affect a lot of people. And what we do concrete, I want to sort of summarize the seminar, what we have been. We have had excellent speakers. Thank you for everybody. Thank you for the warm greetings from everybody. We still continue our work, international and domestic. And we are starting next year 2 foreign ministry projects in the international level, one in Kenya and one in Myanmar. And we also have actually done a lot of domestic and helping people here inside Finland. We are, as Eli was mentioning, we have this waste food program that we are collecting food twice a week. You can pick up a food package also in our Caritas office, including with 12 other organizations where we are one of them in this collect ring sort of. We are also opening our Caritas store now next year, where we are also doing with the clothes stuff. We have cooperation with the Zara clothes shops, where you can find already the collect boxes from Caritas where you can put clothes, and they are coming to Caritas store, where we are then selling and giving for those people in need. We are also having our friendship cafe continuing for people, meeting once or twice in the month, just coming and chatting, just sort of connecting people and sharing and touching, as we have heard how important it is. And we try to also have little actions going on. Now in 5th of November, I invite you all to take part of the charity auction of Nicaragua ceramics. 5th November. That's all. There is the wrong. This is 5th. 5th. Siellä on väärin mailla. Siellä on väärin siellä viessä. Täällä mä annan mailla tämän. Eli there you can buy ceramics, and then we are helping the Nicaragua workers who has made those ceramics. So actually in this same place, thank you Elie that you are arranging these places for us. We will have this auction, and I warm welcome you to take part in this event. Yes, same place as this, and 5th of November is the right date. Laura.
I will read aloud the congratulations from Sininauhaliitto ry. Warm congratulations for your anniversary. We bless our member association and hope you successful years to come. We stand with you, Sininauhaliitto ry.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored about all the nice words what we are coming. I have to say, Elie has been long time beside me, working and struggling with Caritas, getting funds, getting donations, getting projects, starting the place, the office, like everything. And it has been hard work, but it has been great work. And also big thank you for the bishop. We have been working a lot and sitting a lot together, how we developed Caritas and how we continue this work. And I'm sure we will have a successful way to go forward as well. Thank you very much from this day. Thank you for all seminars and participants. Thank you and have a great day and week.